My name is Clara Jensen, and I am 34 years old. I live in the small town of Greystone, Iowa. You might think life here is simple, but there are layers to this place beneath the surface. I have always found a unique sense of fulfillment in helping others, especially children. That is why I decided to work as a therapist in a juvenile facility for boys. While many people thought this job would be challenging due to the behavior of the boys, I actually loved the kids I worked with. Each of them had their own story, their own struggles, and I was blessed to be a guiding light in their complicated lives. The problem was not the boys, but the adults I had to work with. They looked down on therapy as though it were a waste of time and space. They viewed my efforts and those of my fellow therapists as unimportant distractions from the real work. Things took a troubling turn in my workplace when I encountered a patently unacceptable situation. I filed a sexual harassment complaint against a colleague, one of the staff members that had crossed the line. I had no idea at the time, but this man was related to the person who ran the facility, the one with the real power. As you can probably guess, my complaint fell on deaf ears. Nothing happened to him, but my life at the facility took a steep dive afterward. I became public enemy number one, a target for ridicule and animosity from people who had previously claimed to be my colleagues. They were determined to make my professional life a living hell. Despite this, I pressed on. The world outside was grappling with the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic, and I needed the job to survive. But there was an ember of discontent growing in me, and soon it would ignite. As the summer approached, I took stock of my situation. Many of my boys would be leaving the program in July. I decided it was time to step away from this toxic environment and focus on the kids. On a Monday morning, I informed the head of therapists about my intention to resign at the end of July. I wanted to ensure my boys had a transition plan and to give myself time to train the remaining therapists. My supervisor expressed gratitude and told me that I was truly kind for wanting to do this. It felt good to make a difference, however small, before I left. But then, just a few days later, everything changed. On Friday, they summoned me to the office for what I thought would be a discussion about my future transition. Instead, they formally accepted my resignation right then and there. I was bewildered at first, but I took it calmly and accepted their decision with a smile. As I walked out, I felt like I was stepping into a new world, one where I could reclaim control over my life. It was time for my silence to orchestrate vengeance, a quiet storm brewing beneath a calm facade. I knew they had already stripped away my ability to say goodbye to the boys. They had packed my things without letting me see them one last time. That hurt more than anything else. The boys had been my world, and they were left without a chance to find closure. I realized, however, that I had something far more powerful on my side. Our IT guy, bless his heart, was utterly incompetent. He was supposed to create storage on our system for each therapist's files, but he failed to do so properly on my computer. I had voiced my concerns multiple times, but he never took action. So, I had taken the liberty of saving everything I needed on my local drives. They would require my password to access those files, and I had no intent of letting them in. I met with some of my former colleagues about a month after I left. Over lunch, they seemed genuinely happy for me, relieved that I was doing better than before. They told me about the chaos that had ensued after I departed. The head of therapists had taken over my entire caseload, and not long after, quit her job as well. The pressure and stress had become too much, especially for someone who had only been in that position for 3 months. Hearing this brought a literal smile to my face. There is an authentic joy in knowing that the weight of my absence made them crumble. My paperwork was a hot mess, and they had no way to access my computer files. They had to rewrite everything from scratch, which led to much frustration. In their haste to replace therapists, they went on to rehire a particular individual, someone who had left long before because she had been terrible at her job. She had even been cruel to me, and little did she know I had a parting gift waiting for her. The universe has a way of balancing out injustices, and when her husband began to flirt with me on Facebook, I decided to entertain their little virtual dance for a while. It felt good to play the role of the other woman, but I knew I had to strike before fears of consequences settled in. I took screenshots of his messages and sent them to her. The subsequent fallout was never my concern, but I could not help but feel a sense of satisfaction imagining the chaos that must have occurred in their household after that. But the real kicker was how the therapy department seemed to crumble without me. As the therapists I knew began to leave, the facility struggled to maintain its funding because, ironically, therapy was where most of their resources came from. They relied heavily on therapists, people like me who truly cared about the boys, and it was breathtakingly poetic to watch them suffer the consequences of their ignorance. Funny how the very people they belittled became their lifeline. Weeks went by, and I slowly watched the place slip into further disarray. I would occasionally hear about the shambles it was in from former colleagues, many of whom now reached out to me with regrets about their treatment of me. They had seen the writing on the wall. The staff was reduced to one or two overwhelmed individuals trying to fill the shoes of those who cared. And the sad part, the directors of the facility never grasped that they had bitten the hand that fed them. I had turned my unfair situation into a victory, and I reveled in my quiet vengeance. The best part was that I had not had to raise a hand or shout a single word. I let their actions speak for themselves. By simply walking away, I had orchestrated a symphony of chaos in their lives, and that delightful thought brought me a sense of peace. You see, revenge does not always require grand schemes and scandalous acts. Sometimes, the most powerful form is silence. The very absence of my voice opened the floodgates of their downfall. As summer faded into the fall, I shifted my focus. I could have gone back into that world, but instead, I chose a different path. I found work at a local therapy center, one that genuinely cared for its staff and patients. I rebuilt my life, branching into new areas of personal development and self-care, and invested time into hobbies. I painted, wrote, and spent more quality time with friends. Most importantly, I forged deeper connections with my own sense of self-worth. My experience had not only taught me about the toxic nature of environments, but it also revealed my inner strength. Months later, I learned that the juvenile facility had announced various layoffs and changes. One of my former colleagues reached out and told me how the decision-makers were scurrying to fill roles left by the mass exodus of therapists and mismanagement. The instability persisted, along with the realization that the loss of funding was hurting them financially. They had failed to recover and could never expect to thrive again without a change of heart about the value of people like me, those who do the real work with the children. I may have lost my job at the facility, but in many ways, I found my voice again in the silence I had cultivated. The boys I had fought for would always be part of my story, and even in leaving, I had left a mark on their lives in ways I would never fully understand. My heart swelled with pride knowing that, while their journey continues, they have the chance to thrive with new therapists, ones who would have the time and energy to invest in them. As the snow began to fall gently on the ground and the nights grew longer, I realized I had woven a beautiful tapestry of resilience, growth, and, yes, quiet revenge. There is power in equality among people, where therapists are not only respected, but seen as integral to their mission. I had chosen the path of peace, of grace, and of understanding, and that was the greatest victory of all. And while I might never know the full extent of the turmoil I left behind, I held tight to the knowledge that sometimes silence is the loudest response of all. The world outside Greystone was filled with possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all, one silent victory at a time.